All right, hey you guys, if you're watching this on Monday, November 6th, I just pulled the syllabus up here to go over a couple dates. The Chapter 8 quiz is due before today's class or at 11:55 on November 6th. So if you haven't got that done yet, please do so. It will be open past the due date, but there will be the 10% deduction per day late on that. And then also the Chapter 9 My UJ quiz will open up when I get back on the 8th. So that will be open then. And we'll get through about half of Chapter 9 in this online lecture, and then we will finish it up and do a little Jeopardy game on the 8th when I get back. So that Wednesday we will finish Chapter 9 and do the Jeopardy game to be ready for Exam 2 that following Monday. So if you have any questions on the syllabus or whatnot, just send me an email. But with that being said, we will go ahead and start Chapter 9 notes. All right, so Chapter 9 is the 20th and 21st century sports. So the objectives of this chapter are to articulate the influence of Luther Gulick, Thomas Wood, Clark Hetherington, J. Nash, and Jesse Williams on play, physical education, recreation, and sports in the U.S. To be able to describe the expansion of men's intercollegiate athletic programs from their interclass origins to today's physical education, to be able to explain how women's sports programs evolved over the years, and lastly, the transition of participants and programs from play to recreation to fitness in the United States. So we'll start with the 20th century physical education. So in the 1920s, school physical education shifted from formalized exercise programs to curricula that involved sports, games, aquatics, and outdoor activities with educational outcomes stressed. So professionals continue to discuss which system of physical education would be best to meet the needs of students in the United States. So the two themes that emerged in physical education were education through the physical, which was to develop the all-around student through physical education. And then the second theme was education of the physical. So physical development is the primary focus in this theme. Both of these philosophies vied for advocates and influenced school physical education and sport curricula. But by the end of the 1800s, no gymnastic systems had been adopted as they were too formal and they focused on strength, which we went over in the last chapter. But this is basically the end of when we were pretty much done talking about gymnastics now. So we'll talk about how students wanted activities that were competitive, fun, and with more freedom for expression. The new physical education system focused on developing the whole individual through participation in play, sports, games, and natural activities. So be sure to know what the new physical education focused on or make note of that bullet point. Delphine Hanna, who's pictured to the right here, she influenced and helped bridge the transition from the 19th to the 20th century. Gymnastics failed to appeal to physical educators, and physical education moved toward activities offering fun, competition, and freedom. So Delphine Hanna taught Luther Gulick, Thomas Wood, J. Nash, and Jesse Williams. These four men, along with Clark Hetherington, moved physical education away from formalized gymnastic systems toward the new physical education system. So we will talk about each of those men. I just wanted to go over the quotation towards the bottom from Thomas Wood. The great thought in physical education is not the education of the physical nature, but the relation of physical training to complete education, and then the effort to make the physical contribute its full share to the life of the individual environment, training, and culture. All right, Luther Gulick attended Oberlin College along with Thomas Wood, and these two were both students of Delphine Hanna, and they had similar ideas about physical education. So in 1887, Luther Gulick became an instructor at the YMCA training school in Springfield, Massachusetts, and then 2 years later he became the superintendent here. He emphasized sports and started the YMCA Athletic League. He also introduced the YMCA triangle, which is pictured in the bottom right here. So be sure to highlight or circle that to know that he said that spirit, mind, and body were together as a whole for individuals. He was the director for physical training in the New York public schools. He supported gymnastics as school curricula. So although he supported gymnastics as the basis of school curricula, he founded the public schools athletic league to provide after-school sports opportunities for boys. He advocated play. So he was the founder of the Playground Association of America, and he started the Campfire Girls, which he initiated with his wife in 1913, and it led in the camping movement. He also wrote a book called A Philosophy of Play, which articulated the importance of play as an educational force and helped begin the play movement within physical education. Thomas Wood. So like I said on the previous slide, he attended Oberlin College, and he directed the Oberlin Gymnasium for Men. So after directing the gymnasium work for men for 2 years, Wood received his medical degree and developed the undergraduate physical education program at Stanford. 10 years later, he joined the faculty at Teachers College, where he established the first master's and doctorate in physical education programs. Health education as a separate field was what he stressed, and he authored The New Physical Education with Rosalind Cassidy. So the New Physical Education book provided the philosophy foundation for refocusing school programs from gymnastics to sports, games, dance, aquatics, and natural activities. Clark Hetherington. He was a student of Thomas Wood at Stanford. He coined the term New Physical Education. So that's been said quite a few times, and it will be throughout this chapter, and that was coined to Clark Hetherington. Make note that he promoted the 4 objectives of physical education, which are organic, psychomotor, character, and intellectual development. And his philosophy was play is a child's chief business in life. He helped to establish the undergraduate physical education programs at U of Missouri, Wisconsin, and New York University and Stanford. He also helped to establish a graduate program in physical education at New York University. Jay Nash was the assistant supervisor of physical education at Stanford. He was one of the first graduates of NYU's PhD program in physical education. He was faculty at NYU, and he was actually Hetherington's replacement. He stressed that recreational skills should be learned early in life and could provide enjoyment throughout life. Make note that he advocated for school programs to teach carryover or lifetime sports to encourage people to adopt an active lifestyle. So Nash stated that school programs should teach these carryover or lifetime sports to encourage people to adopt these active lifestyles, that is, people should be educated for leisure purposes. Jesse Williams led the promotion of education through the physical. So physical education uniquely contributes whole person through the physical realm. So he was a teacher at Columbia University, where he wrote 41 books. And make note that he was vital to the survival of physical education programs during the Great Depression. So physical education uniquely contributed to the physical development of a child, as well as the education of the total child. Social and intellectual activities in physical education prepare the student for society, is what he believed. All right, Charles McCloy was against a primary emphasis on educational outcomes. He led a campaign against the primary emphasis on education outcomes as advocated by Wood, Cassidy, and Williams. So he stressed organic and psychomotor development. So McCloy believed that physical education's unique contribution within education should be to develop individuals' physical fitness and sport skills. Make note that he advocated for education of the physical. So rather than supporting Williams' claim that physical education merited inclusion in schools because it helped attain social, emotional, and intellectual goals, McCloy affirmed his commitment to education of the physical. So the educational objectives were secondary to the development of the physical aspects. He encouraged measurements of progress through standardized tests, so he initiated the use of tests in physical education, which we still use today, like the mile run test or whatnot. So some other major developments in physical education. First, the play movement, which was led by Luther Gulick. It influenced non-school programs, and playgrounds and parks were established. So we talked about this a little bit in chapter 8, but Luther Gulick was the prime motivator of the playground movement. Next, women's physical education. So not until the 1970s did most college physical education programs end their practice of separation by gender. Throughout most of the 1900s, women's physical education focused on preparing teachers with strict dissociation from competitive athletics. Next, education of the physical, which we just went over, was Charles McCloy, and he focused on physical skill development. Exercise science was led by Dudley Sargent. He was the leader of anthropometrics, which included measurements of strength and power, which he used these anthropometric measurements, to prescribe exercise programs for individuals. And lastly, the movement education was child-centered curriculum, which presents movement challenges to children and encourages them to use problem solving through guided discovery to learn fundamental skills. So this one's very important. The movement education significantly influenced elementary school curricula and still does today. Youth sports. So in the 1920s, people began to expect schools to provide competitive sports for children. Communities, private associations, and civic organizations stepped in to create competitive youth sports programs. So this gave students the opportunities to participate in something that was more competitive. However, it was highly discouraged by physical educators. They believed that the negatives, such as winning, surpassing all other goals, taking the fun out of the game, so with the high competition, they felt that trumped learning. So they believed that those negatives outweighed the positives. And also communities and private associations stepped in. For example, exposure to the media, such as televising the Little League World Series, has served only to intensify the pressures on young competitors, as well as raise the expected levels of performance to adult and even professional levels. As a result, children are no longer allowed to be children or play for fun, is what is believed. Also, parents felt that when some parents that are over involved and they lose focus of children and playing for the fun of the game, sports can become dangerous and risky activities, is what was believed. So intramurals evolved out of the need for something in between athletics and physical education. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, most college athletic teams and some physical education programs evolved out of interclass competitions organized by male students. As athletics and physical education developed separate programs, a need for recreation did still exist. So in 1913, the University of Michigan and Ohio State University appointed the first intramural directors, which are pictured to the right here. And this gave students who were not athletes an opportunity to compete. So intramurals now operate as campus recreation programs with a broader scope. So many sports are offered, such as co-ed, recreation, fitness classes, special events, and tournaments. Many intramural and recreational programs changed from being funded by the athletic departments and physical education departments to being funded by student fees. Collegiate sports. So in 1906, the NCAA was formed, and know that the NCAA was formed out of concern for brutality of football. In the early 1900s, concern in collegiate sports, such as football, which led to threats of banning football and led to the meeting with Teddy Roosevelt to standardize the rules. And as a result of this meeting with Teddy Roosevelt, small group of faculty became the first NCAA representatives, and the game of football was restored. So the NCAA was the main force until 1938, when the National Junior College Athletic Association was introduced, and they managed the rules of two-year institutions. And then later in 1952, there was another division where the NAIA was introduced, and they managed the rules of smaller colleges. So the NCAA, make note of this slide, or be sure to know what made the NCAA what it is. So it initially was an advisory organization. In the 1950s, national acceptance of athletic scholarships and institutions gave up some of their power to the NCAA to ensure that rules would be followed for scholarships and recruiting. So they standardized the rules and provided championships, and athletic scholarships changed the role of the NCAA dramatically. So institutions relinquished authority to ensure that other institutions followed the rules as well. In 1951, there was a television contract which enforced leverage for the NCAA. So with that being said, the NCAA could penalize an institution economically for a rule violation by disallowing the TV appearance of whatever game or whatnot that the college was playing in. So then there was a separation into the different divisions, 1, 2, and 3. Division 1 popularity led to stricter NCAA control. So Division 1 athletes at times have coaches with multi-million-dollar contracts, which were hired to win and fired to lose, and these students were unsuccessful at academics. So the popularity of Division I and the control of NCAA continues to get stricter. And the question is, will corporate sponsorships of teams be next? It's just kind of unknown what is to come with Division I athletics. So that is about half of the notes for Chapter 9. I think that we will stop here, and I will finish up Chapter 9 when we meet on the 8th or Wednesday, and then we will play the trivia game, and you guys can ask any questions that you would like for our second exam on that day. But if you have any questions in the meantime, be sure to email me. And other than that, just another reminder that quiz over chapter 8 was due November 6th, right before class at 11:55 a.m. All right, thank you guys.